Welcome back, everyone. Have you ever wondered exactly how a plain, boring text document magically transforms into the beautifully structured, fully styled web pages we interact with every single day? Well, that's exactly what we are going to demystify today. Our goal in this explainer is to master the foundational relationship between HTML containers and CSS styling rules. Whether you're setting up a simple personal blog or you're just pulling your hair out trying to figure out why your button absolutely refuses to turn blue, getting a grip on these basics is a total game changer. So let's jump right in.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's tutorial. We'll start with HTML building blocks, move into the CSS cascade, break down specificity and the points game, tackle inline styling rules, and finish up with internal style sheets.
All right, Section 1, HTML building blocks.
Let's kick things off by looking at how we actually group content on a page, specifically the fundamental difference between the span and div elements. On the left, we have the span element. This is an inline container. You can think of it kind of like a digital highlighter or a sticky note. It doesn't force a new line, and it's perfect for styling just a specific word or two within a sentence. Now, on the right, we have the div or division tag. This is a block-level container. Imagine this as a large shipping box. It automatically drops down to start on a brand new line. It takes up the full available width of the screen, and we use it to build major page layouts.
Okay, let's look at the exact code syntax to see how this plays out. Inside this standard paragraph tag, say we want to isolate just one specific word. We literally wrap the word important with an opening and a closing span tag, and then we apply a style rule to set the color to red. Oh, and a super common beginner mistake here, forgetting that closing span tag. If you leave that slash out, your entire web page might suddenly turn red, which is definitely not what we want.
And here is what that code actually looks like when the browser renders it. Because the span is an inline element, the flow of the sentence isn't interrupted at all. It doesn't break onto a new line. Only our target word gets that precise surgical red styling.
Now contrast that inline behavior with a div container. Notice how it acts as a major structural box holding everything together. In this snippet, the div wraps around both an H2 heading and a P paragraph. By grouping these distinct, separate pieces of content into one logical section, it becomes incredibly easy to move them around the page together or apply a background color to that entire block all at once.
Moving right along to Section 2, the CSS cascade. So we have our raw HTML structure, but what happens when styling rules collide? You might literally have 3 different rules in your code telling a single paragraph to be 3 different colors. Well, cascading is simply the automated process your web browser uses to figure out which of those conflicting rules actually wins and gets applied to the element. Think of it as the ultimate CSS rulebook.
To make that final decision, the browser's cascade relies on 3 main tiebreakers: specificity, inheritance, and the order of declaration. Inheritance just means the child element will naturally take on the styles of its parent unless you tell it otherwise. But let's look a little closer at the other 2, starting with the order of declaration.
Let's do a quick mini quiz to test this out. Look at this code block. First, we tell the paragraph to be red, and then right underneath it, we tell the exact same paragraph to be blue. So which one wins? Well, because styles declared later in the document overwrite earlier ones, meaning the browser reads top to bottom, the blue color wins. It's the absolute simplest tiebreaker the browser has.
All right, Section 3, specificity, also known as the points game.
Specificity is defined as the degree to which rules are defined. Simply put, the more precisely you target an HTML element, the higher the specificity value, or the more points that rule earns. It is the secret mathematical formula browsers use to determine priority when things get complicated.
If we break down the math, it looks exactly like this. You'll definitely want to memorize this hierarchy. A basic element selector, like targeting all paragraphs, gets just 1 point. A class gets 10 points. An ID selector gets 100 points. And sitting right at the very top, inline styles get a massive 1,000 points, absolutely crushing any of those standard CSS rules.
Let's put this into a real-world scenario, a virtual battle, if you will. We have 3 CSS rules trying to color the exact same piece of text. The paragraph element tries to apply blue with 1 point, the class tries to apply green with 10 points, and the ID tries to apply red with 100 points. If you do the simple math here, 100 easily beats 10 and 1. The ID selector wins the battle hands down, rendering our text red on the screen.
Which brings us to Section 4, inline styling rules.
So how do we actually write that 1,000-point inline style?
The syntax is super straightforward. You apply the CSS directly inside the specific HTML element. Inside your tag, you just type style equals, and then drop your properties and values right there in quotes. In our example, we are telling this one specific paragraph to have blue text and a 20-pixel font size. It's incredibly targeted, and it literally only affects this single tag.
Now you might be thinking, hey, if inline styles get 1,000 points and always win, why don't we just use them for everything? Well, yes, it's really quick, and it's great for testing out a quick visual change. But imagine you're building a real-world project, say a 50-page website, and your client suddenly decides they want to change the primary brand color from blue to purple. With inline styles, you would have to manually dig through your code and change that color thousands of times. It's a nightmare to maintain, it completely destroys the readability of your HTML, and the code can't be reused anywhere else.
That exact problem leads us perfectly into Section 5, Internal Style Sheets.
Check out how clean this code is. Instead of jamming our CSS rules directly into the HTML body alongside our content, we place them inside a dedicated style element securely tucked away up in the head section of the document. We completely separate our design rules from our physical content. Now, every single H1 heading and P paragraph on this entire page will automatically adopt these styles, and we don't have to write the same inline code over and over again.
This is a fantastic approach for keeping a single-page project super organized. It is vastly easier to maintain than inline CSS because the styling logic is completely separate from the content structure. But we do have to keep the limitations in mind. These styles are trapped on this one specific HTML page. If you go back to that 50-page website scenario, you can't easily reuse this internal style sheet across the other 49 pages. Plus, dumping massive amounts of CSS into the head does increase the overall file size of that specific HTML document.
Okay, let's pull all of this together into one ultimate priority checklist for the CSS cascade. At the very bottom, you have the browser's default styles. Above that, you have external CSS files. Beating those are the internal CSS styles we just looked at. And sitting at the very top of the throne is inline CSS. If a paragraph is being told to be green by an internal style sheet, but you drop an inline style right on the tag telling it to be blue, the inline style is going to win and overwrite it every single time.
But wait, there's actually one more trick up the cascade sleeve. If you add the exclamation mark important keyword to a CSS rule, it instantly rockets to the highest possible priority. It acts as the ultimate override, crushing absolutely everything else in its path. Yes, even those 1,000-point inline styles. However, a really common beginner mistake is using this as a crutch to brute force a fix for messy code. It is an incredibly powerful tool, so make sure you use it sparingly and wisely.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to think about for your own web dev journey. Are you relying way too much on quick, messy, 1,000-point inline styles? Or are you ready to properly separate your content structure from your visual design by utilizing internal CSS containers? Mastering that balance between HTML structure, CSS specificity, and overall code maintainability is exactly what separates a beginner from a true pro. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope you feel empowered to get out there and write some incredibly clean, cascading code.